The phone call from my daughter came at 3:47 a.m., and I knew before answering that my carefully constructed life was about to collapse. Through the darkness of my bedroom, I could see the screen glowing with her name, and my hands trembled as I reached for it, knowing that whatever Brianna was calling to say at this hour would change everything. The voice on the other end was cold, clinical, concerned in that performative way that made my stomach knot. "Hey there, beautiful souls. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story today. I am curious, what part of the world are you tuning in from? Drop your city in the comments below." All right, let us dive into what happened to me. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes for my daughter to inform me that she had scheduled an appointment with a neurologist, that she had been speaking with my son Thomas about my behavior, that they were worried. The word Alzheimer's hung in the air like poison gas, seeping into every corner of my bedroom, contaminating everything I thought I knew about my family. I set the phone down on my nightstand with deliberate care, watching my hand move through the dim light as if it belonged to someone else. My pulse hammered against my throat. The digital clock now read 3:52 a.m., and sleep had become impossible. I pushed myself up from the mattress, my bare feet finding the cool hardwood floor, and moved through my apartment with the light still off. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness, and I navigated around the furniture I had arranged myself just 2 months ago when I moved into this place after the divorce. The kitchen window overlooked the street below, where orange streetlights created pools of illumination on the empty sidewalk. I pressed my palms against the counter, feeling the smooth granite beneath my skin, grounding myself in something solid and real. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window glass, a ghost image of a woman who suddenly did not recognize the reality she was living in. My mind spun backward through the past 3 months, analyzing every family dinner, every phone conversation, every seemingly innocent question. The way Brianna had started writing down things I said during our weekly lunches. The way Thomas had begun showing up unannounced at my apartment, his eyes scanning the rooms as if conducting an inspection. The hushed conversation I had interrupted at my grandson's birthday party, the one that stopped abruptly when I walked into the kitchen. I pulled my laptop from its place on the counter and opened it, the screen's blue light harsh against my eyes. My fingers moved across the keyboard with purpose as I logged into my email account. The password worked on the first try, the same complex combination I had been using for years, the one I had created using a system I developed during my 30 years as an accountant. Nothing foggy about my memory there. I scrolled through my sent messages, my received mail, my calendar. Everything was organized, dated, filed appropriately. I opened my banking app next, reviewing 3 months of transactions. Every payment was on time, every deposit accounted for, every budget category color-coded and balanced to the penny. My hands moved with practiced efficiency through spreadsheets I had created, tracking my investments, my retirement accounts, my utility bills. The evidence was irrefutable. I was not losing my mind, which meant something far more sinister was happening. I closed the laptop and moved to my home office, a small room I had converted with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a desk facing the window. My fingers traced along the spines of books I had read in the past year alone, each one marked with sticky notes and annotations in my precise handwriting. I pulled out my journal from the locked drawer, the leather-bound book where I documented my days with the discipline of someone who knew the value of record-keeping. The entries were detailed, specific, chronological. No gaps, no confusion, no signs of cognitive decline. I flipped to the date of my grandson's birthday party and read my notes. I had documented the strange behavior, the whispered conversations, the way my daughter-in-law kept asking me if I had taken my medication, even though I was not on any medication. I had written down my suspicions even then, 3 weeks ago. But I had dismissed them as paranoia, as sensitivity left over from the bitter divorce. Now those suspicions crystallized into certainty. My family was gaslighting me. They were building a narrative, constructing a false reality, convincing people in my life that I was suffering from dementia. The question that burned through my chest was simple and terrible. Why? I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over names I had trusted for decades. Each entry represented a potential ally or a possible conspirator. My pulse quickened as I composed a text to my best friend of 30 years, typing with deliberate precision to demonstrate clarity of mind. The phone buzzed within seconds. Not available right now. Your son called yesterday. We should talk when you're feeling better. My hand clenched around the device, the edges biting into my palm. They had already reached her, already poisoned that well. I strode to the kitchen and yanked open the junk drawer, shoving aside batteries and rubber bands until I found the small recorder I used for work meetings. The plastic was cool and solid in my grip. Evidence. I needed documented proof of my own competence, my own sanity, before they could erase it entirely. The doorbell chimed, 3 sharp notes that sent adrenaline flooding through my system. I moved to the window and peered through the curtain. A silver sedan sat in my driveway, unfamiliar. A woman in a navy blazer stood on my porch, clipboard pressed against her chest, her posture radiating bureaucratic authority. I pressed record on the device and slipped it into my cardigan pocket before opening the door. The afternoon heat rushed in, carrying the scent of cut grass and exhaust. Rachel Peterson? The woman's smile was practiced, professional, cold around the edges. Yes. She extended a business card between 2 fingers. I'm Linda Chavez from Adult Protective Services. May I come in? I'd like to ask you a few questions. My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral, every muscle under control. I stepped aside and gestured toward the living room, my movements measured and deliberate. She entered with the careful observation of someone cataloging details, her eyes sweeping across my organized space, my clean surfaces, my coherent life. Please sit. I indicated the armchair and positioned myself on the sofa where I could see her face clearly in the natural light. She settled into the seat, arranging her clipboard with unnecessary fuss. We received a call expressing concern about your welfare. Your son mentioned some troubling incidents. What incidents specifically? My voice remained level, each word articulated with the precision of my decades as a high school principal. Memory problems, confusion about dates and events. He mentioned you accused family members of stealing from you, and that you've been making unusual financial decisions. She clicked her pen, poised to write. Have you been experiencing any difficulties with daily tasks? I leaned forward, forearms resting on my knees, and locked eyes with her. The recorder pressed against my ribs, capturing every word. Ms. Chavez, I can recite every bill I've paid this month with the check number and amount. I can tell you the current balance of my retirement accounts to the dollar. I can name every medication I'm not taking because I don't need any. Would someone with Alzheimer's be capable of that? Her pen paused above the paper. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her features. Would you like me to prove it? I stood and walked to my office, retrieving my financial binder and my medication organizer, still completely empty. When I returned, I spread them across the coffee table between us like a winning hand of cards. Here's my checkbook, my investment statements, my empty pill container because I'm healthy. What exactly did my son tell you? She shifted in her seat, her fingers tightening on the clipboard. Mrs. Peterson, Ms. Peterson, I'm divorced. The correction came sharp and immediate. Ms. Peterson, your son seemed very concerned. He mentioned you've become paranoid, that you're accusing the family of conspiring against you. And if they actually are? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Her expression changed, a subtle recalibration happening behind her eyes. She set down her pen and really looked at me for the first time, seeing beyond whatever narrative she had been fed before arriving. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, turning the screen toward her. My fingers moved with deliberate precision across the glass surface, navigating through accounts, showing her transaction histories organized by category. Each swipe revealed another layer of my meticulously maintained financial life. Transaction from 3 days ago, I said, pointing to a specific line. Coffee shop on Morrison Street, $475. 2 days before that, grocery store, $127.43. Last week, I paid my property taxes online, $3,200 split into quarterly installments. Miss Chavez leaned forward, her professional mask cracking at the edges. She studied the screen, then glanced at her clipboard where my son's accusations presumably sat in neatly typed lines. I scrolled further, muscle memory guiding my thumbs through menus and screens. My pulse hammered steady in my throat, but my hands remained rock steady. Years of managing budgets and running a household had trained these fingers to know every password, every account number, every automated payment. The social worker reached for her water glass and took a long drink. Her Adam's apple bobbed twice. When she set the glass down, condensation pooled on my coffee table, spreading in a wet ring that caught the afternoon light streaming through my curtains. I closed the banking app and opened my calendar instead. Color-coded entries filled every week. Doctor appointments I'd made myself, volunteer shifts at the library, standing lunch dates with former colleagues. Each entry contained detailed notes, addresses, confirmation numbers. Does this look like confusion to you? I rotated the phone slowly, giving her time to absorb the organized chaos of an active life. Because if it does, then half the population should be in memory care. She exhaled through her nose and finally set her clipboard face down on the cushion beside her. The gesture felt significant, like watching someone holster a weapon. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. Your son mentioned you've been hiding documents, making accusations about financial impropriety. Not hiding, securing. I stood and crossed to my bookshelf, where a leather portfolio sat between 2 heavy volumes on African American history. My fingers traced the embossed edge before lifting it free. The weight felt substantial in my hands. I returned to the couch and opened the portfolio on the coffee table, spreading it wide. Bank statements filled the left side, printed and highlighted in yellow, where unexplained withdrawals appeared in repeating patterns. On the right, I'd organized copies of my mother's will, the power of attorney documents my son had requested 6 months ago, and printouts of emails discussing my deteriorating condition that I'd never been copied on. Miss Chavez's professional composure fractured completely. She leaned over the documents, her finger tracing the highlighted sections. Her breathing changed rhythm, shorter, faster intakes that suggested recognition of something deeply wrong. These withdrawals. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. From your accounts? My mother's accounts, the ones I'm supposed to manage as executor of her estate. I tapped a highlighted section dated 3 months prior. $5,000, listed as medical expenses, but my mother's insurance covered everything. 2 weeks later, another $3,000 for home repairs that were never done. The social worker's jaw tightened. She flipped through several more pages, her pen now moving across her own notepad in rapid scratches that bore no resemblance to the careful checkmarks she'd been making earlier. I pulled out another document. This one, a printed text message chain I'd recovered from my cloud backup. The conversation between my son and his sister laid out their strategy in stark digital clarity. My daughter's name appeared repeatedly. Jennifer, always pushing harder, always suggesting more aggressive tactics. They needed me declared incompetent before I could finish auditing the accounts. The words tasted bitter, like old coffee grounds. Easier to explain missing money if everyone believes I'm confused and paranoid? Ms. Chavez sat back, her spine pressing hard against my couch cushions. She rubbed her forehead with both hands, fingers digging into her temples. When she looked up, her eyes held something between anger and exhaustion. How long have you known? 6 weeks, maybe 7. I gathered the documents back into their portfolio, my movements precise and controlled despite the tremor that wanted to creep into my fingers. I started noticing the discrepancies 2 months ago. Took me time to gather proof. She reached for her phone, then stopped, her hand hovering in midair. Ms. Peterson, I need to make some calls. This goes beyond my initial assessment. I recorded our entire conversation. I touched the small device still tucked in my cardigan pocket. I've been recording everything since this started. Her eyes widened fractionally, then she nodded once, sharp and decisive. Smart. Keep doing that. The front door rattled in its frame. Not a knock. Someone was using a key. Metal scraping against metal with the aggressive confidence of ownership. I stood from the couch, my knees protesting the sudden movement. Ms. Chavez's head snapped toward the entryway, her body tensing like a compressed spring. The door swung open. My son walked in first, his 6-foot frame filling the doorway, shoulders squared in that way he'd learned from years of high school football. Behind him came Jennifer, her heels clicking sharp staccato beats on my hardwood floors. A third person followed, a man I'd never seen before, carrying a leather messenger bag and wearing the kind of expensive suit that whispered money rather than shouted it. Mom, we need to talk. My son's voice carried that forced gentleness people use with children and the elderly. He stopped when he saw Ms. Chavez, his jaw tightening. Who's this? Adult Protective Services. Ms. Chavez rose, positioning herself between them and me. She pulled out her badge wallet, flipping it open with practiced efficiency. I'm conducting an assessment. Jennifer's face flushed red from her neck to her hairline. She dropped her purse on my side table with enough force to rattle the lamp. This is ridiculous. We're her children. We called you because she needs help. I'm aware. Ms. Chavez slid her badge back into her jacket pocket. The assessment is ongoing. The stranger stepped forward, extending his hand toward me while completely ignoring Ms. Chavez. His smile revealed teeth too white to be natural. Mrs. Peterson, I'm Dr. Gerald Thompson. Your children asked me to come by and have a chat with you. I kept my hands at my sides. My heart hammered against my ribs, hard enough that I could feel my pulse in my throat. I have a doctor. I don't need another one. Dr. Thompson specializes in memory care. Jennifer moved around the couch, her movements quick and predatory. She reached for the portfolio I'd left on the coffee table. He's here to help. I lunged forward, my hand clamping down on the leather folder before her manicured fingers could touch it. The movement sent a sharp pain through my lower back, but I didn't let go. Jennifer pulled against my grip, her eyes meeting mine with an expression I'd never seen on my daughter's face before. Pure, undiluted fury mixed with something that looked like fear. Let go. Her voice came out low and dangerous. No. Ms. Chavez stepped between us, her arm creating a physical barrier. Everyone needs to take a step back. Now. My son moved toward me from the other side, his hands outstretched in a placating gesture. Mom, you're being unreasonable. We're trying to protect you. You've been so confused lately, making wild accusations. About your embezzlement? The words came out louder than I'd intended, echoing off my living room walls. About the $200,000 you've siphoned from my accounts over the past 18 months? Dr. Thompson's smile vanished. He glanced at my son, then at Jennifer, his eyebrows rising in a silent question. The room filled with a silence so thick I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the tick of the mantel clock, someone's breathing coming too fast. Jennifer released the portfolio and stepped back, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. See? This is exactly what we've been dealing with. Paranoid delusions, accusing her own children of theft. She turned to Dr. Thompson, her voice cracking with manufactured distress. It's gotten so much worse in the past few weeks. Ms. Chavez has seen the bank statements. I clutched the portfolio against my chest like a shield. The transfers, the forged signatures, all of it. My son's face drained of color. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document, the paper crisp and official-looking. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. We have a psychiatric evaluation. From Dr. Martin Richards. He's assessed you twice in the past month during your appointments. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. Dr. Richards had been my primary physician for 15 years. I'd seen him for my regular checkup 4 weeks ago, then again 2 weeks later for what I'd thought was a routine follow-up. He'd asked strange questions both times. Questions about what year it was, who was president. Could I remember a list of words he'd told me 5 minutes earlier? Ms. Chavez took the document from my son's hand, her movements deliberate and controlled. She scanned the paper, her lips pressing into a thin line. This states Mrs. Peterson exhibits signs of moderate cognitive decline and early-stage dementia. That's a lie. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He never said anything like that to me. Because you wouldn't remember. Jennifer's words dripped with false sympathy. That's how the disease works, Mom. You forget the conversations. You forget what you've been told. Dr. Thompson opened his messenger bag and extracted a tablet. He swiped through screens with efficient finger movements. I've reviewed your medical history, Mrs. Peterson. The documentation is quite thorough. Combined with the behavioral patterns your children have described, the accusations, the paranoia, the hoarding of documents, it paints a concerning picture. She's being defrauded. Ms. Chavez's voice cut through the room like a knife. I've seen evidence of significant financial irregularities. My son laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. You've seen papers my mother has been obsessively collecting. She's filled 3 boxes with random bank statements, receipts, printed emails. She's connected them with string like some kind of conspiracy theorist. He gestured around my living room. Look at this place. She used to keep it immaculate. Now there are papers everywhere. I followed his pointing finger. He was right. Stacks of documents covered my dining table. Folders lined the wall by my bookshelf. Post-it notes covered my refrigerator, each one marking a date, a transaction, a discrepancy I'd found. That's evidence, I said. That's research. That's obsession. Jennifer moved closer to Dr. Thompson, aligning herself with him physically. She doesn't sleep. She doesn't eat properly. All she does is go through these papers over and over, convinced we're stealing from her. Ms. Chavez held up one hand. I need everyone to stop talking. She looked at me, her dark eyes searching my face. Mrs. Peterson, do you consent to being evaluated by Dr. Thompson? No. The word came out firm and clear. We have medical power of attorney. My son pulled another document from his jacket. Dad set it up before he died. If Mom becomes incapacitated, we're authorized to make medical decisions. The walls seemed to close in. My late husband's face flashed through my mind. His smile, his trust in our children, the careful estate planning we'd done together. He'd wanted them protected. He'd wanted me protected. He'd never imagined they'd use those protections as weapons. I lunged for the document in my son's hand. My fingers closed around the edge of the paper, and I yanked hard enough that it tore. The sound of ripping parchment cut through the tension in the room like a knife. "Mrs. Peterson!" Ms. Chavez stepped between us, her broad frame creating a barrier. Her hand gripped my wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough that I couldn't move forward. My son stumbled backward, clutching the torn paper against his chest. His face had gone pale, then flushed red. Dr. Thompson moved to steady him, one hand on his shoulder. "This is exactly what we're talking about." Jennifer's voice came from somewhere behind me. "She's becoming violent, aggressive. Dad would never have." I twisted away from Miss Chavez and spun to face my daughter. The room tilted slightly with the sudden movement. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out whatever else Jennifer was saying. I could see her mouth moving, see the calculated concern etched across her features. But the blood rushing through my head created a roaring sound that swallowed her words. The coffee table caught my shin as I moved forward. Pain shot up my leg, sharp and immediate. I stumbled, but caught myself on the arm of the sofa. The fabric felt rough under my palm, grounding me for a moment. "Mom, please sit down." My son's voice had taken on a pleading quality now, different from the rehearsed authority he'd used before. I shook my head. The movement made the room spin again, but I locked my knees and forced myself to stay upright. My breathing had become ragged, each inhale catching in my throat like I'd been running. Dr. Thompson opened his leather bag. The metallic click of the clasp echoed in the sudden silence. He pulled out a tablet computer, its screen glowing blue-white in the afternoon light filtering through my curtains. "If you won't consent to a full evaluation, perhaps we could start with something simple." His voice remained smooth, practiced. "Just a few questions, to establish a baseline." Miss Chavez released my wrist but stayed close. I could smell her perfume, something floral and official. Her body language had shifted. Where before she'd seemed skeptical of my children's claims, now she watched me with a different kind of attention, the kind that assessed threat level and calculated response times. I backed toward my dining table, toward my stacks of evidence. My hip bumped against the corner, sending several papers sliding to the floor. They scattered across the hardwood in a flutter of white rectangles covered in my handwriting. Account numbers, dates, transaction amounts that didn't match up between statements. Jennifer moved quickly, bending to gather the fallen documents. Her manicured nails scraped against the floor as she collected them into a neat pile. She held them up, displaying my notes to Miss Chavez like exhibits in a trial. "See? Pages and pages of the same information, copied over and over. She's convinced we opened a credit card in her name, that we've been transferring money out of her accounts." Jennifer's thumb traced over one of my highlighted sections. "But when we show her the bank statements proving nothing's missing, she insists they're fake, that we've somehow manipulated the records." My mouth opened to respond, but Dr. Thompson had moved closer with his tablet. He held it at an angle that forced me to look at the screen. Questions filled the display, simple things, the kind they'd asked me before. "What year is it? Who's the president? Count backward from 100 by sevens." I slapped the tablet, lapped the... Not hard enough to break it, but enough to knock it sideways in his grip. The doctor's eyebrows raised, and he pulled the device back against his chest protectively. I know what year it is. The words came out through gritted teeth. I know who I am. I know what they're doing. My son had his phone out now, holding it at chest level. The camera lens pointed directly at me. A small red dot in the corner of the screen indicated he was recording. The realization hit me like cold water. Every word I said, every movement I made, was being documented. They'd edit it later, show it to judges and lawyers, and whoever else they needed to convince. They'd cut out their provocations and leave only my reactions. The torn paper, the slapped tablet, the wild-eyed woman ranting about conspiracies. Ms. Chavez had noticed the phone, too. She frowned, and her hand moved toward my son in a gesture that suggested he should lower it. But the damage was already done. How long had he been recording? Since they'd arrived? Since before they'd even knocked? I moved sideways along the table, putting distance between myself and Dr. Thompson's reaching hands. My fingers trailed across the stacks of documents I'd organized so carefully. Months of work, hundreds of hours spent cross-referencing statements, tracking discrepancies, building an undeniable case, and they'd reduced it all to evidence of dementia. My hip collided with the table corner as I backed away from them. The sharp pain radiated up my side, but I kept moving, circling around to put the entire length of furniture between us. The stacks of documents trembled with the impact. One pile toppled, papers sliding across the polished wood surface like a shuffled deck. Dr. Thompson set his tablet down carefully. His hands rose in what was probably meant to be a calming gesture, palms forward, fingers spread wide. The gold wedding band on his left hand caught the overhead light. Nobody's trying to take anything from you. His voice had dropped to that measured, therapeutic tone. We just want to make sure you're safe. Safe. The word landed like a stone in my chest. I'd heard it before, in the waiting room at the bank when they'd refused to let me access my own accounts. From the building manager, when he'd changed my lock without notice. From the woman at the DMV who'd confiscated my driver's license based on a form I'd never seen. They'd all claimed to want me safe. My hand found the next stack of documents. These were the property records, the ones showing how my daughter had added her name to my deed 6 months ago. I'd found them in the county assessor's office, had to pay $15 for certified copies. The clerk had given me a pitying look when she'd handed them over. Ms. Chavez took a step closer to the table's edge. Her eyes tracked across the papers, scanning the visible documents with professional efficiency. I watched her gaze pause on several pieces, bank statements highlighted in yellow, medical records with sections circled in red, printouts of text messages with timestamps and phone numbers visible. Mrs. Peterson, I can see you've been working very hard on gathering information. She gestured toward the evidence spread before us. That's actually something I'd like to discuss with you, without everyone else present. My son shifted his weight behind her. The phone stayed up, still recording. His face above the device remained carefully neutral, but his jaw was tight. A muscle twitched near his temple. You mean without witnesses? I grabbed another stack of papers, holding them against my chest like armor. So nobody can verify what you actually say to me. She blinked once, a micro-expression of surprise crossing her features, before her professional mask reassembled itself. Her lips parted, then closed again. I'd scored a point, gotten past her rehearsed responses. Dr. Thompson retrieved his tablet from the table. His fingers moved across the screen, tapping and swiping. Taking notes, probably. Recording observations. Building his case that the confused woman in front of him couldn't distinguish reality from paranoia. The window behind me let in afternoon sun that heated the back of my neck. Sweat had begun collecting along my hairline, trickling down toward my collar. My mouth tasted metallic, adrenaline mixing with the coffee I'd finished an hour ago. The papers in my arms were getting damp where my palms pressed against them. I think we should all take a step back. Ms. Chavez's hand moved toward her briefcase, which sat on the floor near the door. Maybe get some air, cool down, and reconvene when everyone's calmer. No. The word came out louder than I'd intended. You came to my house. You brought fake doctors and cameras. You don't get to leave and come back with more people, more paperwork, more reasons why I need to be managed. I released the papers. They fluttered back onto the table in a disorganized heap. My hands were shaking badly now, tremors that started in my fingertips and traveled up through my wrists. I pressed them flat against the table surface, trying to stop the visible evidence of my fear. The recording would capture that too. Shaking hands. Another symptom to add to their list. My son lowered the phone finally. He slipped it into his jacket pocket, but his hand remained there, presumably keeping the recording running. His eyes met mine across the room, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker in them. Guilt, maybe, or doubt. But then it was gone, replaced by the same determined expression he'd worn when he'd explained about power of attorney, about how this was all for my own good. Mom, please. His voice cracked slightly on the second word. Just let them help you. The familiarity of his voice, the same voice that had called me from college to ask about laundry, and called me from his wedding to say thank you, and called me from the hospital when his first daughter was born. That voice saying those words shattered something inside my chest. I turned away from all of them, facing the window. The street outside looked normal. Mrs. Henderson was getting her mail. The Martinez kids were drawing chalk pictures on their driveway. A delivery truck idled at the corner. The world continuing its ordinary rotation while mine collapsed inward. Behind me, I heard Ms. Chavez whisper something to Dr. Thompson. Papers rustled. Footsteps shuffled against the hardwood floor. They were regrouping, deciding on their next approach. My reflections stared back at me from the window glass. 50 years old, gray threading through my hair, lines around my eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. I looked tired. I looked scared. I looked exactly like someone who might be losing their grip on reality. That was the worst part. They'd been so thorough, so careful in constructing this narrative, that even I had started doubting myself some mornings. Waking up and wondering if maybe I had forgotten conversations, misplaced documents, imagined conspiracies where there were only family members trying to help an aging parent. But then I'd find another discrepancy, another forged signature, another medical bill for appointments I'd never attended. The floorboards creaked as Dr. Thompson moved closer behind me. I could see his reflection in the window glass, his hand reaching toward my shoulder. I stepped sideways before he could make contact, putting the armchair between us. My phone sat on the coffee table, screen dark and useless. Michael had the passcode changed 2 weeks ago, for my own protection, he'd said, to prevent me from making confused calls to old friends at odd hours. Another layer of isolation wrapped around me like burial cloth. We need to discuss your medication regimen, Dr. Thompson said, pulling a prescription pad from his jacket pocket. The white paper caught the afternoon light, crisp and official. There are new treatments that can help with memory issues, with confusion. I watched his pen move across the pad, forming letters I couldn't read from this distance. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a warning drum. Those pills would fog my mind, make me actually become the person they were pretending I already was. I'm not taking anything, My voice came out steadier than I felt. Ms. Chavez opened her briefcase with 2 sharp clicks. She extracted a folder, thick, organized, tabs color-coded along the edge. Mrs. Peterson, I have documentation here from 3 separate physicians confirming cognitive decline. Your son has submitted medical power of attorney paperwork to the county. We're trying to do this cooperatively. The word cooperatively hung in the air like smoke. I moved toward the coffee table, keeping my eyes on all 3 of them. My laptop sat underneath yesterday's newspaper, deliberately hidden. Inside that laptop were screenshots, saved emails, bank statements showing withdrawals I'd never authorized. Evidence of the systematic dismantling of my life. Michael shifted his weight, blocking the path to the hallway. His jaw was set in that stubborn way he'd inherited from his father. My son, who I'd rocked through nightmares and taught to ride a bike and put through graduate school, now stood as a human barrier in my own home. The house needs to be assessed, Ms. Chavez continued, making notes on her tablet. We'll need to inventory valuables, review your financial accounts. It's standard procedure for establishing a conservatorship. The word hit like a physical blow. Conservatorship. They weren't just trying to control my medical decisions anymore. They wanted complete authority over everything. My home, my money, my freedom to make any choice about my own existence. I grabbed the laptop from under the newspaper. The movement was quick, desperate. Dr. Thompson lunged forward, surprisingly fast for a man his age. His hand caught my wrist, fingers digging into the tendons. The laptop clattered back onto the table. Please don't make this difficult, he said quietly. His grip tightened when I tried to pull away. Agitation is a common symptom. We can help with that too. Michael's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted into something harder. Vanessa's at the bank. She says Mom tried to transfer funds this morning to an account in Colorado. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. I'd been nowhere near the bank. I'd been here, in this house, making my own breakfast and reading the newspaper and trying to figure out which attorney in town might actually listen before my family got to them first. I haven't left this house in 3 days, I said. Check the security footage if Michael actually installed the cameras he claimed were for my safety. Ms. Chavez's eyebrows lifted slightly. She made another note on her tablet, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. Dr. Thompson released my wrist but positioned himself between me and the laptop. My skin throbbed where he'd gripped it, red marks already forming in the shape of his fingers. There's also the incident at the grocery store last week, Michael said. Security called me when you became disoriented in the parking lot. Another fabrication. I'd gone to that store 4 times last week without incident. But who would they believe? A concerned son with official-looking documents, or a middle-aged woman accused of memory problems? The walls of my living room seemed to contract. 3 people, 3 strangers wearing the masks of helpers and healers, surrounding me with papers and prescription pads and practiced concern. Outside, Mrs. Henderson had finished collecting her mail. The Martinez children had moved indoors. The delivery truck had driven away. My hand moved to the coffee table drawer, fingers finding the handle. Inside were more printed documents, proof that the medical reports were falsified, that the signature on the power of attorney forms wasn't mine, that someone had been systematically accessing my accounts. Dr. Thompson's hand clamped down on the drawer before I could pull it fully open. I think we should consider an immediate evaluation at the hospital. Just for a few days, to stabilize things. The hospital, where they could control everything. Visitors, phone calls, what information I had access to. Where they could pump me full of medications and document my confusion and build an unshakable case that I was exactly what they claimed. The drawer splintered as I yanked it free from Dr. Thompson's grip. Documents scattered across the hardwood floor. Bank statements, forged signatures, printed emails between Michael and someone named Gerald Kensington about asset liquidation. My feet moved before conscious thought registered, sweeping the papers toward the fireplace where morning embers still glowed faintly. Dr. Thompson lunged, his shoulder connected with my ribcage, driving the air from my lungs as we collided with the bookshelf. Hardcover volumes rained down around us. I twisted sideways, fingers closing around a heavy medical textbook. Gray's Anatomy, the irony not lost on me, and swung it toward his reaching hands. The book caught his wrist with a satisfying crack. He recoiled, cradling the injured joint against his chest. Behind him, Nurse Patricia moved toward the scattered documents, her sensible shoes crunching over broken picture frames. My grandmother's photo stared up from the debris, glass spiderwebbing across her face. I dove for the nearest cluster of papers. My fingers scraped against wood grain, gathering evidence that had taken me 3 weeks to compile. The forged medical evaluations. The fraudulent diagnosis reports with Dr. Thompson's letterhead, but a suspiciously different signature style. The screenshots of my actual bank records showing withdrawals I'd never authorized. Michael's hand caught my ankle. He pulled, hard, and my chin cracked against the floor. Blood filled my mouth, copper and warm. His weight pressed down on my legs, pinning me as I clawed forward, still clutching a handful of documents. "She's having a violent episode." Michael's voice carried manufactured panic. "Attacking medical professionals. This confirms the diagnosis." The nurse's phone camera pointed at me. Recording, creating new evidence to support their narrative. A confused woman assaulting her caregivers, clearly unfit to manage her own affairs. My free leg kicked backward. The heel of my shoe found Michael's jaw, snapping his head sideways. His grip loosened enough for me to wrench free, knees scraping across the floor as I scrambled toward the fireplace. The poker leaned against the brick facade, black iron cool against my palm. I stood, weapon raised, chest heaving. Dr. Thompson had recovered, flanking me from the left while Patricia blocked the hallway exit. Michael remained on the floor, blood trickling from his split lip, eyes calculating rather than injured. "Put it down, Mom." Michael's words came soft, therapeutic. "You're confused. These delusions about conspiracy, they're symptoms. We're trying to help you." The poker's weight centered me. Through the window, I caught movement. Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down walking her golden retriever. She glanced toward my house, then away. Just another Tuesday afternoon in the suburbs. I feinted left toward Dr. Thompson. He flinched backward, exactly as anticipated. My real movement went right, sweeping the poker in a wide arc that sent the nurse's phone clattering across the room. It skidded under the sofa, recording stopped, or at least disrupted. The maneuver cost me. Dr. Thompson's arms wrapped around mine from behind, pinning the poker uselessly against my side. His breath came hot against my neck, smelling of coffee and mint. Professional fingers sought pressure points at my wrists, techniques designed to make me drop the weapon without leaving obvious bruises. I threw my head backward. Skull met nose with a crunch that reverberated through my bones. His grip slackened. I spun inside his loosened arms, driving my elbow upward into his solar plexus. He folded, gasping, releasing me completely. Patricia had retrieved her phone. She stood in the hallway entrance, filming again, speaking rapidly into the device. "Subject demonstrating extreme paranoid aggression. Attacking medical personnel without provocation. Recommend immediate psychiatric hold." Michael rose slowly from the floor, straightening his designer shirt. His expression had shifted, the concerned son mask slipping to reveal something colder underneath. He reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a folded document with official county letterhead, visible even from across the room. I didn't want to do this. He unfolded the paper with deliberate care. But I have a 72-hour involuntary commitment order. Judge Harrison signed it this morning based on Dr. Thompson's preliminary evaluation. The words hit harder than the physical blows. 72 hours in psychiatric lockdown, 3 days where they could administer medications, conduct evaluations by doctors they'd selected, build an unassailable case. 3 days where I'd have no access to my lawyer, my evidence, my ability to fight back. The poker fell from my numb fingers, clanging against the hearth. Behind Michael, through the window, normal life continued. Cars passing, birds settling on telephone wires. The world turning while mine collapsed inward. Dr. Thompson straightened, blood streaming from his broken nose, staining his white collar crimson. He pulled a small case from his pocket, flipping it open to reveal a pre-filled syringe. The liquid inside caught the afternoon light, amber and thick. "This will help you calm down." His voice came nasal, distorted by swelling. "Make the transition easier." I lunged sideways as Dr. Thompson moved toward me with the syringe, his blood-spotted fingers wrapped around the barrel. My hip collided with the coffee table, sending the evidence folders sliding across the polished wood. Financial statements scattered like fallen leaves, the proof of my stolen retirement accounts spreading across the floor in glossy paper trails. Michael grabbed my left arm, his grip iron tight above the elbow. The pressure sent sharp pain radiating up to my shoulder. I twisted hard, driving my right elbow backward into his ribs. The impact jarred through my arm, but his hold loosened enough for me to wrench free. Years of tennis had kept my shoulders strong despite everything. The front door stood 15 feet away across the living room. Between me and freedom, Dr. Thompson blocked the path, syringe raised like a weapon. His broken nose had swollen grotesquely, purple spreading across both cheeks. Behind me, Michael's labored breathing suggested at least one cracked rib. I feinted left toward the kitchen hallway. Dr. Thompson shifted his weight to follow. In that split second, I pivoted right, dropping low and diving past him. My shoulder caught his knee, the bad one. I'd seen him favor it earlier. He buckled sideways with a sharp cry, the syringe flying from his grasp. It hit the hardwood with a crack, amber liquid pooling around the shattered plastic. My fingers closed around the doorknob. The metal felt cold, solid, real. I yanked it open, stumbling onto the front porch into brilliant afternoon sunlight. The concrete steps descended before me, leading to the sidewalk where neighbors walked dogs and children rode bicycles past manicured lawns. "Help!" The word tore from my throat, raw and desperate. "Someone help me!" Across the street, Margaret Chen looked up from her gardening, trowel frozen in midair. 2 houses down, the Rodriguez family paused their driveway basketball game. Normal people living normal lives, witnesses to whatever came next. Michael appeared in the doorway behind me, phone pressed to his ear. His calm voice carried clearly. "Yes, she's having a violent episode. She attacked her doctor, broke his nose. Please hurry." The lie wrapped around me like chains even as I stood there in the open air. To anyone watching, I was the unhinged woman fleeing medical help. Michael was the concerned son protecting his mentally ill mother. Margaret set down her trowel and started across her lawn toward me, worry creasing her weathered face. We'd been neighbors for 18 years. She'd brought me soup when my husband died. I'd watered her plants during summer vacations. "Rachel, honey, are you all right?" Her voice carried genuine concern, not suspicion. I opened my mouth to explain everything: the forged papers, the bribed doctor, the systematic theft of my life. But the words tangled in my throat. How could I compress months of calculated betrayal into coherent sentences while Michael stood there projecting wounded patience? Instead, I reached into my cardigan pocket. My fingers found the USB drive I'd hidden there before Michael's arrival, the backup containing every scanned document, every email, every piece of evidence I'd gathered. The small plastic rectangle felt impossibly light for the weight of truth it carried. "Margaret, take this." I pressed it into her soil-stained palm. "Everything's on it. Bank records, forged signatures, all of it. Give it to Detective Jennifer Walsh at the police station. Tell her Rachel Peterson needs help." Margaret's fingers closed around the drive automatically, confusion clouding her expression. Behind her, sirens wailed in the distance, growing steadily louder. Michael's emergency call had triggered a response faster than any burglary or fire ever would. The magic words, "violent psychiatric episode," commanding immediate attention. I descended the porch steps carefully, deliberately. My legs shook but held steady. At the bottom, I turned back to face Michael, where he stood framed in the doorway of what used to be my home. Sunlight caught the gray in his hair, the expensive watch on his wrist, the one he'd bought with money transferred from my accounts. "I raised you better than this." The words came quiet but clear, carrying across the space between us. His jaw tightened. For just a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Shame, regret, some ghost of the boy who'd once brought me dandelions picked from the yard. Then his expression hardened back into the mask of concerned righteousness. "You're sick, Mom. You need help." The squad car rounded the corner, lights blazing red and blue across white houses and green lawns. Behind it came an ambulance, its sirens splitting the peaceful afternoon. Other neighbors emerged now from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Patterson from next door, the college students who rented 3 houses down. All watching, all bearing witness. I stood straight in the center of my front lawn, hands visible at my sides, making no sudden movements. The grass felt soft beneath my feet, where I'd kicked off my shoes during the struggle inside. Above, clouds drifted across an impossibly blue September sky. Somewhere a lawnmower hummed, life continuing in its ordinary patterns while mine shattered and reformed. The squad car stopped at the curb. 2 officers emerged, hands resting on their belts with practiced caution. The driver was young, barely 30, with sharp eyes that swept the scene methodically. His partner was older, gray stubble shadowing his jaw. Michael moved down the steps, his limp barely noticeable now, his face arranged in lines of weary concern. "Officers, thank God you're here. My mother has Alzheimer's. She attacked her doctor." "That's a lie." I kept my voice level, conversational. "Check the USB drive Margaret Chen is holding. It contains proof my son has been stealing from me and falsifying medical records." Writing block 1010. The courtroom 6 months ago felt like another lifetime. Now I stood in the community center auditorium, setting folding chairs in neat rows while early morning light streamed through tall windows. Dust motes danced in the golden beams. The smell of fresh coffee drifted from the table by the entrance, where I'd arranged pamphlets and sign-in sheets. My hands moved steadily, metal chair legs scraping against polished wood floors. No tremor, no hesitation. Just the simple satisfaction of honest work preparing for people who needed help. The double doors opened with a soft creak. A woman entered, shoulders hunched, eyes darting nervously around the space. She clutched her purse against her chest like a shield. I recognized that posture, the defensive crouch of someone who'd stopped trusting the world. "Welcome." I crossed the room with an easy stride, my low heels clicking against the floor. "I'm Rachel." "You must be here for the support group." She nodded, barely meeting my eyes. Her fingers worried the leather strap of her purse, twisting and releasing in anxious rhythm. I gestured toward the coffee table. "Help yourself. We'll start in about 20 minutes when the others arrive." She moved to the refreshments while I returned to arranging chairs. Through the windows, I could see the parking lot filling up. More cars arriving. More people stepping into sunlight, ready to share their stories of families who'd lied, who'd used diagnoses as weapons, who'd tried to steal lives with forged signatures and false concern. The woman settled into a chair near the back, coffee cup warming her hands. Her shoulders relaxed incrementally as other attendees filtered in. A man in his 60s with silver hair. 2 middle-aged women who entered together, clearly friends. A younger woman whose jaw was set with barely contained rage I knew intimately. By 9 o'clock, 15 people filled the seats. I stood before them, feeling the weight of their collective pain and hope. The morning sun lit the room with warmth that seemed almost deliberate, as if the universe itself wanted to shine light on what had been hidden in shadows. "My son told everyone I had Alzheimer's," I began, watching recognition flicker across their faces. "For 8 months, he controlled my finances, isolated me from friends, and nearly had me committed. A judge reversed the conservatorship last month. Michael is awaiting trial for elder fraud." I let that sink in while moving to the whiteboard, picking up a marker. "Today, we're going to talk about documentation. How to protect yourselves. How to build your case." I wrote 3 words in bold letters: evidence, witnesses, resources. The younger woman raised her hand, anger making her movements sharp and quick. "My sister has everyone convinced I'm incompetent, including my doctor. Get a second opinion from someone outside her influence. Record every interaction legally. Start now, today." I wrote down the name of the lawyer who'd helped me, the detective who'd taken my case seriously when others dismissed me as confused. These people know the signs of family exploitation. We worked through the morning, sharing strategies and stories. I demonstrated how to use smartphone apps to record conversations in single-party consent states. Explained how to open new bank accounts at different institutions, how to secure important documents, how to identify flying monkeys in social circles. Around noon, people began gathering their belongings. Several approached to shake my hand, to thank me with voices thick with emotion. The man with silver hair pressed a folded check into my palm. "For the support group, keep it going." Outside, I walked to my car through autumn warmth that felt like benediction. Leaves were turning gold and crimson on trees lining the parking lot. I'd sold the house, too many bad memories embedded in those walls, and bought a modest condo closer to downtown. The legal fees had taken a chunk of my savings, but Michael would be paying restitution. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they did turn. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Chen. "Coffee next week? I have someone who needs to talk." I typed back a quick confirmation while sliding behind the wheel. The leather seat welcomed me, familiar and comfortable. This car was mine, titled only in my name, parked where I chose. Simple freedoms that tasted sweeter for having been nearly lost. The drive home took me past the old house. I didn't slow down or feel any pull toward it. New owners had planted flowers in beds I'd once tended. Life moving forward, as it should. My condo waited with quiet rooms and no ghosts. I made lunch, savoring the autonomy of choosing what to eat and when. Afterward, I opened my laptop to draft next week's support group agenda. The screen glowed with possibilities rather than threats. Every keystroke was mine alone. Late afternoon sun painted orange squares across my living room floor. I stood at the window, watching people walk dogs and push strollers along the sidewalk below. Community happening naturally, without suspicion or fear. Tomorrow, I'd meet with two women starting their own legal battles. Next month, a local news station wanted to interview me about elder fraud. The reflection in the window showed a woman who'd survived, who'd fought back, who'd reclaimed her life from those who'd tried to steal it. Not a victim, not someone diminished by lies, just Rachel Peterson, standing solid in her own truth. My phone rang. I let it go to voicemail while pouring tea, steam rising fragrant and hot. Whatever came next would happen on my terms. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.